Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. I hope you're well today. Today we're going to be talking about INFPs, a type that I am lucky to know a little bit because most of my best friends are INFPs, not all, but most, and my very dear brother is also an INFP. Now, before I proceed with this video, let me remind you that I have written a book on the INFJ type, and who knows, perhaps one day I'll write a book, an equivalent book for the INFP type. But in the meantime, the Ecstatic Soul, an in-depth investigation, most in-depth investigation of the INFJ you will find. Getting great reviews so far. All the links available down below in the description box. Less than $10, ebook, paperback formats, all the links for all the countries. You help me, I help you. Okay, so let's move on to our little discussion of the INFP. Now, the reason why I wanted to return to the topic of the INFP is that not so long ago I proposed a new interpretation of the INFP, and I provide a link below if you're curious to check that video as well. That in turn led me to ask myself, why am I still unhappy with the current picture that is provided of INFPs online? What is there about it that I'm not completely happy with? And I suppose I was not completely satisfied, not with the quality of my new interpretation. I think it's a reasonable interpretation using a model that I worked on myself. But I suppose the fact that if I only were to present this new model, this new technical reinterpretation, it wasn't going to have as much impact as if I were also to try to tackle and challenge some preconceptions straight, And this is what I want to do here. Now, what is the main preconception that I would like to challenge? Simply this idea that INFPs are the sensitive, sweet, emotional dreamer, harmless dreamers, essentially. People who live in their heads, who, yes, feel like a deep well of emotions, but are also seen as this quick to offend, sensitive type, the quintessential romantic, the quintessential poet that doesn't really belong to society nowadays, and wherever they are, they still manage to add a poetic touch, a sensitive touch to their occupations. So the INFP is a kind of misfit, somewhat in the same sense that the INFJ is a kind of misfit, but whereas the INFJ is perceived as a mystic lost in a world where there is currently no place for the pure play of intuition, because everything in capitalist societies anyway is dictated by the instrumental relationship between production and the value of production. You have similar issues for the INFP, but from a different perspective, again, according to this stereotypical conception, where INFPs can't really find satisfaction in the world because the world does not have room for whatever does not fit a realistic viewpoint, a viewpoint that is oriented to facts, since they are not supposed to be oriented to facts, but to imagination, dreaming, and so on and so forth. And that's all very well as long as you stick to a very, very idealized conception of INFPs. But that view really collapses quite quickly as soon as you start meeting up with INFPs in the real world. Certainly those traits that I just listed that are very much a part of the INFP stereotype exist in my INFP friends, and they have that side, and it adds a lot to their charm, to their, to the idea that they have a very active inner child. I mean, all those things are true, but that doesn't mean that INFPs are these walking, bundles of emotions that can be upset at any possible moments, and in whose presence we should try to focus on just preserving this beautiful integrity of their feelings, because INFPs cope rather well with the world. I mean, if you look around you, they do get jobs. They are not these people who just stay home and write poetry all the time and lament the way things have turned out in our modern societies. And my suspicion is that the reason why the stereotype is so prevalent, I think it's due to two main causes. I think number one cause is that other people, particularly people who are distant in their cognitive function stack makeup from the INFP type, tend to project a lot of unresolved psychological challenges that they experience onto their view of the INFP, because the INFP, as it's presented, and by selecting a number restricted and maybe not entirely illustrative number of historical examples like Edgar Poe and tortured souls like him, that projection, I think, allows these other types to project something about them that they feel is missing. The types that are fitting the realism of contemporary society in every single sense, and whose inner child they do not allow to play because they're so willing to restrain it, they're so willing to keep it silent so that they can pursue their lives, attain their goals. I think that there's a part of the soul that in this case becomes bankrupt. And the ideal, I would say, it's not just an idea, but it's an ideal, an idealization of the INFP comes from this desire to see that this possibility of having an active inner child still exists, but somehow the INFP is represented, is personified as a soul that possesses these qualities, but of course at the same time is added this notion that they are somehow unfit for contemporary society. And I think that this psychological mechanism, which consists in a projection and a transference, has a goal, which is from the perspective of the types that do this, to at one and the same time to reassure themselves that their inner child is still something that exists. It's personified, externalized into this idealization of the INFP, but at the same time to also reassure themselves about the fact that they were right to repress this inner child, that they were right to not allow him or her to have its voice, because it's clearly unfit for society, since that's what the whole character, the whole idealization of the INFP type consists of. So people can at one and the same time say the inner child exists, the potential for boundless creativity exists, but we're right to repress it because look, it clearly isn't fit to cope with the world. And I think that's the number one cause of this, the influence of this stereotype, is that it fits a lot of other people really well to believe that this is true. And the second cause is actually, I have to say, and my INFP friends who follow this channel can tell me what they think, because again, this is only a hypothesis, but I think that basically the INFPs online themselves, not all INFPs by any means, but a number of INFPs who may, for whatever reason, feel like they are also looking for an identity, that they are looking for something that will help ground them, because at the end of the day, everyone is looking for an identity, and I'm not denying that IN types, perhaps even more so INF types, are the most likely to experience difficulties with settling for a clear identity, particularly if they're correlated with a type 4 Enneagram. And I think that there's a great temptation to see the existence of this stereotype and to claim it for themselves. To say, yes, that's what we are, exactly in the same way that INFJs will see the stereotype about the prophetic seer, about this type that has visions and that is not fit for the world because they belong more in a monastery or in a cave where they can be hermits, will also tend to, seize on this opportunity to embody this type, even though they know deep down that that's not what they are, because that type doesn't really exist. It doesn't really represent anything, and no INFJ is really like that, except maybe one or two historical examples. And it's kind of the same with INFPs. I think there's a tendency for INFPs to, or at least a significant number of INFPs online, to embrace this stereotype because that gives them something distinctive. Except that I think that at the end of the day, it also imprisons them within this close conception that is a preconception that they are not rational, that they are not equipped to deal with the world. So it's a kind of self-defeating conception that I'm not completely happy with. And again, it doesn't fit with my knowledge of INFPs as they surround me. Many of them are much more practical than myself. Now, you might say, well, I'm an INFJ, so I'm not here to, I'm not one to speak, and that could be a fair point to make. And also, just to conclude on this front, I think that the risk here is basically twofold. It's that, well, there's a risk, and then there's how to basically surpass it, to transcend it in order to attain more self-realization. So the risk is to accept this stereotypical image so much that this idea of morbid self-obsession with FI dominance leads the INFP to be unhealthy, basically, because the INFP is almost expected to be morbid, to be like a Kierkegaard, to be like a Werther in The Sorrows of Young Werther by Goethe. You know, these types, like sometimes they're idealized, these literary creations are idealized by people or by INFPs as the quintessential INFPs. These are not healthy types. They might be very interesting, very fascinating literary characters, but that's not what a person of an INFP type should seek to be. The exploration of one's emotions is very important, but it's not all there is. And INFPs are certainly capable of engaging with the world beyond subjectivity to an extent that is often underestimated. And I think that one ideal way out of this possible impasse is to remember INFPs are the most value rational types of all the 16 types with ISFPs, because they're FI dominance, which means that they are the most able to ensure that whatever actions they decide to go for, that they decide to embark on, whatever scheme of behavior, whatever decision they make is aligned with their values, with the values they hold dear, because they're highly aware of the FI function that allows them to link a particular perception in the world to an action via this alignment with the grid of values they possess. No type is more able to do this than INFPs and ISFPs. And value rationality, just about that. And from this perspective, types that have unconscious FI are far less value rational, and in this sense less rational than INFPs. So INFPs better remember this. They are just as rational as INTPs, but from a different perspective, and they are not the dreamy teddy bears, at least not only the teddy bears that we're supposed to think they are. Hope you enjoyed the video. Give me a like and subscribe if you are interested in seeing more content, and I will see you soon, guys. Bye bye.